All right, so first of all, welcome to our today's webinar. Um, Today, we will be talking about how to build and track each step of your WhatsApp funnel with Superchat and Google Sheets. My name is Fabian. You might have seen me either from onboardings, you might have seen me in the product, or maybe also in the help center. And I am a team lead here at Superchat in the customer success team. And I'm joined today by Annalena, who's also a team lead in customer success. She's actually right next to me, but you can't see her currently. She will be handling our chat today. So if any questions might pop up while I'm talking, feel free to ask them in the chat. And either she's going to respond to them immediately, or we will do so in our question and answer round at the end. But I think that's all in terms of public service announcements. And let's hop straight in. I'm going to share my screen for a second. Give me one sec. Here we go. All right. So I think the first question we should answer today is why you should automate and track your sales funnel. Over the course of the past years, I've spoken to many of our customers who came into the onboarding and wanted to start using Superchat, and they did not track their leads coming in whatsoever. And I think this is very important because if you just have a few leads, maybe like one or two in a day, you might be able to have an overview of them and know where exactly they are in the process. But even if it's only one or two a day, and more importantly, if it grows later on, it will be very hard for you to keep track of your process and also see which process might need improvement. So I think the first one here is that you want to spend less time manually sending out messages. So for example, if you have a process of a lead coming in, it is very, very important to keep the time as short as possible to send them the first message. Because the sooner they get a response, the higher likelihood they have of converting as well. So we should not waste any time here. The second step is to increase the likelihood of leads converting. This deeply ties into what I just said in the first point. And this is also one of the main reasons why people start using Superchat and our automated messages, because they just know that, hey, leads might be coming in during the day, which is quite easy for you to answer and reply immediately. But they could also come in the middle of the night, and you don't want your phone to ping in the middle of the night to wake up and answer your leads, maybe even on the weekends. So it's very important to automate this process in order to keep your leads engaged. The third step or third point as to why it is important is to create KPIs and to help you understand how well your process is working. And this is like the main point here, and I can't emphasize this enough. I think it's so important to keep an eye on your process, on your funnel, to identify which step of the way is working really well and which one is not. Because if you have no overview of your funnel, you might spend 1,000 euros for leads, and you can only see how many people actually bought something in the end. But you will have no clue about if they just did not reply at all, if you didn't send them a message, if they just failed to buy the product in the end. So because there's different steps in the customer's life cycle, and if you don't know which one of them is not working, then you can make the necessary adjustments. So it's very important to get the data to then build on top of that. Yeah, this also ties into what I just said. You have to be able to make informed decisions to optimize your process, because it might be an issue of leads just not clicking on your ad in the first place, or it might be in a later stage. And last but not least, it could also be an idea if you hire or have already hired salespeople that you want to create a database to see how many of leads have converted. You maybe want to see how fast your team is working. So you could create these KPIs in order to incentivize your employees to work faster, to work better, and also to convert more leads. So with that being said, let's talk about today's agenda. The first thing we're going to cover today is an example funnel to show you a process I have created. And I will go over the funnel, which of course might differ a bit from what you are doing, but I think it's a very basic funnel, and you can just think about what your funnel looks like and how to adjust it. Next, I'm going to show you how we can automate this funnel, or how we can automate steps in the process by using Zapier. I will also go into the difference between using Zapier or Make or the API. And also, as a third step, how we automate using Superchat. Because there's certain processes where you want to use Zapier, there's others where you want to use the Superchat automations, and I will talk about in which case you should use which. That was a tongue breaker. We will also go over how to send this data to Google Sheets. And it's very important to say that while we do this with Google Sheets here, you can just take Google Sheets as an example. Maybe you have your own tools you want to use, but Google Sheets is something that we all know. It's like one of the most basic tools in order to gather information. So if it works in Google Sheets, it should also work in your program. Sorry. Yes. Then I will dive a bit into how we can use the data we have gathered in Google Sheets and create analytics with it. I'm just going to cover a few basics here because once you have the data in Google Sheets, you can then think about which KPIs are necessary for you. But I will go into 2 or 3 different KPIs that we can track in Google Sheets. And I will also go into the differences between sales and support. So there are certain KPIs that you are able to track within Superchat, which is more on the support side, but there's others you might want to use Google Sheets for. And lastly, there's a few common errors that we've noticed that come up a lot, so we will also dive into those. So let's talk about our example funnel. What I have created here is a funnel where we have a webinar coming up, say, for example, in 2 weeks, and we want people to sign up for this webinar. We want to send out a reminder for this webinar, and if they come to it, they will then receive a 50% voucher to make a purchase in the end. So we want to track exactly where each of our customers is within this funnel. So the first step is they have to complete this type form. They are then assigned as a new lead with specific processes going on in the background, which we'll cover. Then they either attend the webinar or they don't. Then they will receive the voucher. And last but not least, they will make the purchase. All right. I think the easiest way for me to show you how this works is by just doing this process once. So I will switch over to my type form here. And this is also what your customers could see. Please excuse that it doesn't look as fancy. This could, of course, be optimized. But at first, it asks me for my first name, which is Fabian, my last name, which is not Superchat, but for this, it's going to be the phone number. And here I added the part that it has to be in a specific format. And this is actually very important because we at Superchat will need the number in this +44 or whatever the prefix is format in order to be able to use the number. Of course, we can manipulate the format afterwards, but the easiest way for us would be to get this number in the correct format immediately. And last but not least, we are also asking how the customer or the lead heard about us. So this could be a good way for you to track how many people came in because they saw you on your website or in Facebook ads. So you can better think about, hey, how much money did I put into Facebook ads or Instagram ads, for example, and how much money did I make from it to then adjust the spending as well. So in our case, I will say I saw it on the website. By clicking on Submit Now, we will have to wait for a few seconds because there's certain automations going on in the background. But we will see here in our Superchat account, and we will just wait for a few seconds here, that the message that I have created before is being sent, which is a webinar confirmation. Hello, Fabian. Thank you for signing up. It also shows the start time of the webinar. It shows the link to the webinar. And also the contact is created here. So what happens now is we have saved the date and time of the webinar in the contact itself. By doing so, an automation will trigger, which reminds me of the webinar 24 hours in advance, as well as an hour in advance. And once the webinar has taken place, you have to manually enter if the contact or the lead has shown up to the webinar or not, because at least in my example, we have no way to actually get this data from, in our case, Google. Maybe you have a software which sends out this information as well, which would be perfect. In our case, we will have to manually enter that into the system. This is very important because a day after the webinar, we will send out another automated message, which sends out another thank you to the people who signed up and showed up to the webinar and offers them a voucher. And if they then click on a specific button, they will receive the voucher, and we will also get this information to Google Sheets. Because this is also what we can find here in our Google Sheets. As you can see, the information that I've just entered in the type form have appeared in this Google Sheets. It says Fabian Superchat, my number. It also shows the lead source, which is the website, and also shows that I'm currently in the lead stage 1 new lead. And this information will be updated if we update it in Superchat. So if we click in Superchat in a new lead stage, this information will be transmitted to Google Sheets. And because what I've mentioned before is we have to figure out how much time a lead has spent in a stage. So if we notice, for example, that a lead receives a voucher on one day and then takes 25 days to make a purchase with said voucher, we might have to look into this specific part of the process. But if we notice that it takes a lot of time somewhere else, we might have a look at a different part of the process, which is why we can also see the timestamp of me signing up for the webinar here, which is roughly 3 minutes ago. So this is the process. And one last thing. Yeah, now we can also see that it has taken my first and last name to Superchat. And while I'm at it, I should probably change my Superchat to English. That's a good idea. Perfect. First and last name, the phone number is here. And you can also see the webinar link, the webinar start time, as well as the webinar lead stage. So let's think about the webinar taking place. I, of course, visit the webinar. So now somebody says, hey, this contact moves to webinar attended, so stage 3. And by clicking on stage 3 here, if we go back, oh, I did not show this tab. I'm so sorry. All right. As I mentioned, you can see the first and last name here. And down here, I just changed the webinar lead stage to number 3. So if we now go back to the Google Sheets, and this time I'm making sure I'm clicking the correct button, we can see that the lead stage is also updated here, and it also entered the timestamp. All right. And I think with that being the process, I will quickly move back to the presentation, because this is what actually happens. And I think there's a lot to talk about how we actually set up this entire process and this automation. But before we do that, I think it's important to mention that there are several ways to set up this process. There's actually 3 of them in total. The first one is that we do have an open API. So if you do have some programmers or IT people in your company, you could just tell them, hey, they have an open API. You could just give them our API key, and they could program the entire thing themselves. If that's not the case, and if you don't have those resources available, there's 2 different software we usually use. One of them is Make, and another one of them is Zapier. In my example, I use Zapier as it's the market leader. It has, I think, currently over 9,000 different apps you can use within Zapier. And Make is usually reserved to those processes which are a bit more in detail, if you have a bit more experience with setting up these processes. So I just decided to use Zapier in this example. So I think it's best if we hop straight into how we actually set up the entire process, or how you might do it. The first thing you will have to do, of course, is to set up the type form, which you can see here. This was actually one of the easiest parts of setting the entire thing up. I just created 4 different questions. What's your first name? What's your last name? What is your phone number? And how did you hear about us? As you've seen before, once somebody enters their contact information here, this information is then sent to Superchat via Zapier. So I think it's best if we hop straight into Zapier so I can show you the process I have set up. Give me 1 second. Perfect. Here we go. So if you have not used Zapier before, but have used our Superchat automations, as you can see, these 2 are pretty much similar. When thinking about these automations, you will always have to create a process of, if something happens, something else is supposed to happen. So we have to have our trigger, which in this case is the type form, or maybe like a new entry in the type form. I will create a new draft to show you how I fill these fields. Yeah, you have to first connect your webinar, or like your type form, which in my case is called Webinar Fabian. And you can also gather some test data if you fill it out. And then what I did here is I formatted the date and time. And that's something that will always happen if you work with specific timestamps. So you will always have to figure out something regarding the time zones, because they might differ depending on where your people who want to join the webinar are coming from. So in my example, I receive the date for signing in as the 27th of May at 12 o'clock. And this is in UTC. But we are in Germany currently, or at least I am. So I just added 2 hours to this because I just want to send this data to Google Sheets. Yes, and I also put it into a format that is easy to read in Google Sheets. And then what I do next is I create a new spreadsheet row in Google Sheets, because this is a lead where we have no information whatsoever at the moment. So we want a new row to be created in the Google Sheets. Once again, you have to connect the spreadsheet. You have to connect the worksheet itself, because you could have multiple worksheets in one spreadsheet. And you simply enter the data from type form. In this case, it's Anna Smith, so first and last name, the phone number, and no worries, this is not an actual person, or maybe it is, but in this case, it's my phone number. We also take the lead source from Typeform, so we can also have this data in Google Sheets. We add the lead stage, which in this case is always going to be new lead, because it's a new contact, so they're always in the first stage. And we enter the formatted time from the previous step, so we can also see the timestamp of this lead arriving in Google Sheets. And that's all we have to do in here. And this is why in Google Sheets the row was created. As you've already seen before, what also happens is that we send out a first WhatsApp template to confirm to the lead that they have signed up for the webinar. So this is what you can see in the fourth step here, where we first have to connect Superchat and use send WhatsApp template as an action event, because that's what we want to do. Please make sure not to use the send message here, because this only works if the lead contacted you in the past 24 hours. So we do want to use send WhatsApp template. And to then use this WhatsApp template, it first has to be created in Superchat, because these templates here are exactly the same ones we can find in Superchat. I believe most of you have probably already created a template in Superchat, but I'll just quickly go through this. Sharing this screen again. So in order to create a template in Superchat, just head to the settings in the top right via the gear icon, click on templates, the WhatsApp templates. And since this is a test account, like an internal test account, you can see a lot of templates here. Just click on new template, create your own template, or maybe even use our AI to help you get some inspiration. But yeah, you can just send the message here. You can work with buttons. And once you submit them, they will then show up once reviewed by Meta in Zapier as well. So let's jump back to Zapier. Yes, so I chose the template here. I once again entered the first name, because in my template, I wanted to directly reach out to the customer by mentioning their first name, because we have it. And also send the date and time of the webinar, and also the link to the webinar. By sending this WhatsApp template, we at Superchat immediately create a contact as well. But this contact only features the phone number, because that's what we use to send out this WhatsApp template. So in order for us to also have the information of the customer or the lead in this example, we do have to use the update contact node as well. So action event is update contact. And we have the contact ID here, which we do get from our fourth step, send WhatsApp template, because we have to tell the system which contact we want to update. So we can just use the contact ID of the fourth step. And now we enter the first name again, the last name again. And also, if we scroll down a bit, we do enter the webinar start time here, as well as the webinar link. And this start time is very important, because this is the information that is then used in Superchat to start the automation. And that's actually, oh yeah, we also do have to change the webinar lead stage, so we also have that in Superchat. Once this is done, it is then transported to Superchat. So we will jump here. And I will quickly show you this contact here. And we can also see that it has the webinar start time. So now I have set up an automation within Superchat. If we go to automations here, I have set up the first automation, which is a 24-hour reminder. And that's something, if you have a coming up, if you have a webinar coming up, this is something you should definitely use, because I think that a lot of people forget they have a meeting. They maybe have booked it 2 weeks in advance. So you should definitely send them reminders. So what I did here is I created an automation that triggers based on date and time. In this case, the webinar start time. And I have set it up in a way that it triggers 1 day prior to this webinar start time, so 24 hours earlier. And then we do send out a WhatsApp template again, saying, hello, first name. We hope you're doing well and are excited about our webinar tomorrow. This is a reminder. And also we do send them the start time as well as the link to the webinar again. So this is 24 hours earlier. We're going to do the same thing again an hour before the webinar, just to make sure that the people are actually showing up. So the same concept again, date and time trigger. We say 1 hour before, and then send out the WhatsApp template here. So then the customers show up to the webinar, and best case, a lot of them show up. And then you will manually have to go through your contacts and click on webinar lead stage and change the lead stage, in this case to webinar attended, which I've already done prior. In theory, you could also go to your contacts and multi-select all these contacts and change the lead stage all at once. In our example, I will just do it for this one contact. As I've shown before, this changing of the lead stage also transports the timestamp to Google Sheets. And that's the second and last step that I'm going to show you, because, of course, this automation also has to be set up. So I will share this screen instead. And I know this looks like a bit more, but it's actually probably the same length as the previous step. So we added this again. And in this case, our trigger is that a contact has updated in Superchat. But we do not want this to trigger for every single contact attribute, but rather just for the webinar lead stage. So if this happens, we once again change the time zone and add 2 hours to it. So we once again have it in the correct time zone in Google Sheets. And now we have to figure out which contact we're referring to in Google Sheets, right? Because we might have like 50 or 60 people who came to our webinar, and we have a lot of different rows with a lot of different contacts. But the one thing they do not share, which is unique, is their phone number. So what we do here is we use the lookup spreadsheet row in Google Sheets. And once again, choose the correct spreadsheet, the correct worksheet. And we look up a specific column within this Google Sheets, which is the lead phone number. And we are using the phone number we receive from Superchat, so from the first step, to search the correct row, because we trigger this zap by having the contact updated, which always has a phone number, and then we search the same phone number in our Google Sheets again. And we do so to get the row. So we know in this case, this customer or lead is in row 6. And since there is 4 more different lead stages a customer could go into, so webinar not attended, webinar attended, voucher received, or purchase made, we have set up 4 different paths. So the first path here only triggers if the lead stage contains webinar, or like to webinar, which in our case is webinar not attended. The second path only continues if it contains number 3 webinar, so webinar attended. The fourth one only triggers if it says the voucher, so the voucher stage. And of course, the fifth one only if it is in the purchase stage. And once again, we update the spreadsheet row. As you can see here, we take the information from the third step where we looked up in which row our customer is, and we just change the lead stage as well as the time they've entered the stage. And this way you can figure out at what time the stages of your leads changed, so you can then have that data to then go into analytics. But our process is not entirely finished yet, so I will hop back to Superchat, because so far we have only had the webinar. We have changed the contact attribute to showcase if a customer was part of the webinar or not. But what we now want to do is do a follow-up. So once again, we choose the same webinar start time, but this time, 1 day later, so 1 day's snooze, we then create a filter. Because for those people that did not attend, we do want to approach them differently than those customers who did attend the webinar. So we did create a filter here based on the contract attribute. And we said that if the stage of the customer equals number 2, then we go for the top path. If they did attend the webinar, so it's number 3, then it sends out a different WhatsApp template. In both cases, just for this example, I have decided to award the person with a 50% voucher to incentivize them to purchase something. So I ask them, hey, we noticed that you signed up for a webinar but didn't manage to join. We do hope you have not fallen ill, and if so, get well soon. Even though you did not manage to join, we're still happy to send you a voucher. Do you wish to receive your voucher? So if somebody now clicks on yes, voucher please, our fourth and final automation is going to take place. And the same thing is also sent to people who are in stage 3. But in this case, we tell them, hey, thank you for joining our webinar. We hope you had at least as much fun as we had. And they also get the option to get the voucher. So going to the last automation here, number 4, we say if a new message comes in, and this is a different trigger because we only want to do something now if somebody actually clicks on the button yes, voucher received or voucher please. So we have a look at all messages coming into our WhatsApp, but we only want to continue this automation if the content of this message equals yes, voucher please, which is the case if the customer clicks on the button, because if they click on the button, they send the message with the content. If that is the case, so the second note here, then we automatically update the contact attribute lead stage. Because if they click on voucher received, they will receive the voucher. So we should also change it in our system, which then obviously also triggers the process in Zapier I've shown you before to get the timestamp in your Google Sheet. And last but not least, I have sent them a WhatsApp template here saying, great, as promised before, we are awarding you with a 50% voucher. You can claim it by clicking on the button underneath, which will immediately take you to our website. This, of course, would have to be something that you program yourself because it always depends on if you're using Shopify, WooCommerce, or another tool. But yeah, so in this WhatsApp template, you could then link the voucher. Okay. I think that's it in terms of automations and processes we have set up. So I will hop back to the presentation. And just in case any questions came up, we will cover them at the end of the webinar. So now that we do have this data in Google Sheets, we have to think about how we want to use it and why we want to use it. And also to figure out the difference between our support KPIs and our sales KPIs. So because there's also an argument to be made to simply use the Superchat analytics to go into detail here. What our analytics feature focuses on, and I can show you this in Superchat as well, is mostly in terms of support. So if we click on analytics, we can see 2 different overviews in the top left here. One is conversations, which is in a specific time period. You can also filter by inboxes and specific channels. How many conversations were active in total? How many messages were sent? So you can get an overview of the total amount of messages or in conversations. And we can also go into team performance. So if you have several support agents, for example, you can filter again for a different time period and also by user. I will just select all for a second here. And you can have a look at what their first response time is, which is not good in our example, but it's a test account, so no worries. You can also look at the response time median. And you can also see which of your team members took how long, how many chats they've had in total, and how many messages they've sent. But as you can see, this information does not cover specifics such as how much time did my customers spend in a specific stage. And that's the entire reason we are using Google Sheets for this. And I will go over to Google Sheets again. Because as you can see, this is just the raw data, which could also be used for your sales team, for example. If you see that there's a lot of customers who are in the stage voucher received, but they have not actually purchased something, you could tell your salespeople, hey, why don't you reach out to these customers or leads? They have expressed interest before, but they have not purchased something. These are like your number one priority because these are the leads that are closest to actually buying something. But what we want to have a look at is our analytics. And I have just covered 3 different things here. And don't mind me, I'm not a Google Sheets expert by any means. So this might look a bit basic, but I think it's most important to just get the information in any case. So what I've done here is we have a KPI of how many contacts are in which stage. So what I've done here is I have the stage new lead, which I've just entered here. And I just used a formula, which you can see here. So we count if. So we just choose those ones that are in the leads slide down here. We just have a look at the column E, so from E to E. And we just want to have those that feature the same variable as new lead. So a lot of explanation, but what this does is this looks at the column E in this sheet, so just the lead stage, and counts how many of them have one new lead. And we do the same thing for webinar not attended, webinar attended, and so on. So we can get an overview of how many people are currently in which stage. The same logic can be applied to where our leads are coming from, which is something that I've covered at the beginning of the webinar, because we do want to find out how many people came via the website, via Facebook ads, or whatever other marketing opportunity you are using. So in our case, 8 of our customers are coming from Facebook, 12 from Instagram, and 11 from the website. So for example, if I used 1,000 euros to market my webinar on Facebook, but only 100 euros on Instagram, I know that I should probably invest more on Instagram because I pay way less money for each lead that came in. Once again, I have also set up a quick pie chart here. And the third KPI I'm going to go into, or maybe a fourth one as well, is the time spent per stage. So what I've done here is I have just entered row 2 here manually, and also the time spent in new lead. So just from a logical standpoint, if I get a timestamp of a customer in the stage new lead, and at some later point they go into the stage webinar attended, the second timestamp is going to be later than the first. So in order for us to find out how much time was in between these two, I just take the first one and subtract the first one, which is what I've done here. We just take the value of the cell H2 from the other worksheet and subtract F2. So keep in mind H2 and F2. H2 is here. So this is on the 15th of May at 2:30 p.m. And we subtract this time here, which is exactly 30 minutes earlier, which is why this says 30 minutes. And the same thing can be done for webinar attended as well as voucher received. And once you get all this information for your different customers or leads, you can then simply create the average times. Because this could be the case if you just have one customer who took 25 days to purchase something and all the others only took, 30 minutes, then you know that this part of the process is probably all good. So it's always a good idea to have a look at maybe even the median, but in our case, the average. And for this, I just said, hey, let's take the average from the cell C39, so the top one here, all until C69, which is the very bottom. And now we do get the average time the customer or lead has spent in new lead, webinar attended, and also voucher received. As I've said before, there's so many different other KPIs you could go into here, But I think most important is to first get the data into Google Sheets or whatever software you're using, and then figuring out how exactly you want to use this data. But these are just a few examples that can be used. So let's hop back to our presentation. And I will quickly take a sip of water. Thank you for waiting. Yeah, we covered the analytics in Google Sheets. So I can skip this. And yeah, also from my experience, because it's been some time since I last set up a process like this, I did cover some common errors that will occur when trying to set this up. So in order for you to not fall into the same pits as I have gathered them here. The first one is formatting, because depending on which software you use in order to gather your leads, if you use Calendly, Google Meet, Typeform, and whatnot, you will receive the data in a different format, which can be very hard for the different softwares to then interpret this data. So in order to get an understanding of how to best format this, do yourself a favor and just use ChatGPT, which is exactly what I've done while trying to set this up. Because yes, it has been a nightmare every now and then, but simply entering the exact problems you have into ChatGPT and giving you some pointers as to how to solve it, solve the entire thing here. The next thing is time zones, as I've also mentioned before. This will definitely be an issue depending on where customers are coming from. And the best thing I can give you here is the idea to simply test it out. So just enter some information from a specific time zone, see how it is shown in the message in Superchat or WhatsApp, see how it is saved in the Superchat contact and also in the Google Sheets, because I think just testing it is a way easier way to understand it than just going through the code or like the API documentation. So do yourself a favor and just test it out. And last but not least, and this is one of the most important points here, we did speak a lot about how we can actively or automatically send out messages to our customers. And one of the main things we do have to keep in mind is that our customers might not want to receive these messages. So it's very important for us to get the opt-in of said customers. And it is most often the case that our customers come into the onboarding and tell us, hey, we did get the opt-in, but maybe it was like 4 or 5 years ago. And Meta has no way of actually knowing if you received the opt-in or not. So what they look at is how many people mark you as spam, how many people block your number, how much do they interact with your WhatsApp templates, or do you even send out messages to numbers that do not exist on WhatsApp? So these are like the top 4 things you should look into. And I think the easiest way to go over these is to simply ask the customer in the first step, do you wish to receive messages via WhatsApp? And if they don't click it, then we don't do anything of this which is just covered. But if they say, yes, it is okay, then we do start the process, because this highly decreases the chance of you getting blocked on WhatsApp. All right. I think that's it from my side for now. I do have a few other things afterwards, but at first I'd like to go into some open questions. Is there anything that came up so far? Let me quickly take a look. But I think we're all good on that part. All right, no worries. So let me quickly go one slide further. Because there's 2 or 3 things I do want you to keep in mind. The first one is that setting up a process like this can be time consuming if you've not done it before. If you do want to go into it, please do yourself the favor and learn it, because learning this process enables you to create a lot of other processes afterwards. But if you say, hey, I do not have the resources to do this myself, we do offer a service at Superchat that will do the entire process for you. If you are interested in that, you can simply reach out to our consulting team by clicking on the link here, or typing it rather. And we do offer a consultation call where we go into your process, what you want to achieve. We also do cover the costs of said process, and then we can continue. Also, in order for you to set up this integration, you will need the integration add-on, which currently is included from our advanced package and up. But if you're, for example, in a professional package, you will have to book the integrations add-on in order to be able to connect Superchat to an outside tool. And last but not least, we do have more webinars coming up. So do yourself a favor and keep an eye on our website, superchat.com/events, where you will find all upcoming webinars. And one very last thing, public service announcement. If you want to do us as a company and also myself a huge favor, I would ask you to please scan this QR code, which will then lead you to a review site. Because we do benefit greatly from you giving us a review, so we can change the software, for example, if we notice that there's certain things that you're not currently happy with. But we also just appreciate great feedback. And also, as you can see here by the trees that are shown, we do also plant a tree for every single review that's coming in. With that being said, I think we're all good to go. And let me just in case check if any other questions came up. I don't think that's the case. So yeah, thank you very much and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.